Good evening, everyone. My name is Brenda Ahlberg, Kenai Peninsula Borough Incident. I'm not the incident commander. I'm the information officer, but with me today is Dan Nelson, our incident commander regarding the COVID response, and he's going to do a recap of lots of things that have happened over the time frame that was offered to our special assembly meeting today. Dan, I so apologize for the flub up on the introduction, but hello, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing fine, and I hopefully everybody out there will give us some slack. I think you and I are a little tired. It's Friday. It's late. Please bear with us today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we certainly appreciate you tuning in on your Friday evening on well, it looks like a beautiful day here in Soldotna out my window. We'll do a recap and really just kind of want to recap today. But I really want to recap some of this things that have happened throughout since this kind of incident started. And as Brenda mentioned, we had a special assembly meeting today that dealt with several emergency ordinances, one of which was regarding some additional response and funding for the Office of Emergency Management to be able to continue its work in a disaster. And I also gave a briefing to our assembly. We'll recap some of that, but I believe that that recording of that meeting is available on our website and I think maybe on our social media pages as well. So we had a little technical difficulties. Thanks so much for bearing with us. We couldn't quite stream it live, but they've got the recording up. So invite you to listen to that. And that briefing starts right near the top of the meeting. For an update today, we had another one new case confirmed positive in the Kenai Peninsula Borough. That was in the Soldotna area. So that brings us now to a total of 157 cases statewide that are confirmed positive. Just a reminder, they've changed the time deadline each day to when those cases are reported. So remember yesterday, if you tuned in, there's a little bit of a change in the discrepancy on the numbers. And so that was just because of that transition. So 157 total cases, again, one new one in Soldotna. So that brings our total for the Kenai Peninsula Borough to 10 cases. There are 2 positives in Homer, 1 in Kenai, 2 in Seward, 3 in Soldotna, and 2 in Sterling for that total of 10. So these numbers are as of 12 noon each day. So they get collected on a 12-hour cycle. So that's an update for today. For our incident management team, a lot went on. I was busy doing a lot of things and digging into some different things, including working with the assembly today. So that process continued, and they set up their plan for next week. And we're giving some of those folks a very, very well-deserved weekend. And I really want to just take a pause here and kind of explain a little bit of what an incident management team is. And I won't belabor this. It can certainly get complicated, but if you may remember in the Swan Lake fire and some of our other fires, we'll always talk about these incident management teams. We say we have a type 2 incident management team. What that is in that context is a group of people that are highly skilled emergency managers that have specialties. And there's different sections that go with an incident management team. And things like operations or planning or logistics or finance or technical specialists. But our incident management team at the Borough is not a full-time team, like you might hear from some of those other examples I mentioned, but they are Borough employees mostly, and they have their regular day jobs here, but they volunteered to take extra training, extra meetings and exercises throughout the year that we use to plan and prepare and train for these positions should the Borough incur a disaster. So I just want to say those folks, they generally don't get any more money. There's not a bonus or anything like that. They're doing it to serve the Borough and to serve their community. And I really would like to take this opportunity to very publicly thank them. I believe if I have the number right, there's 23 people working on the incident management team right now for this response. And some of them are working all day, some are just helping us part of the day. But each and every one of you contribute to the success of this response. And we know we're certainly in for a long term, but I just like to publicly thank those employees and all the folks that have contributed to that team and are helping us be successful. So I think that's a good recap of the day.
Dan, with regards to the special meeting, the assembly meeting, why did they hold that out of the normal cycle of twice a month on first and third Tuesday. Can you explain what that was all about?
Of course. So, based on our recommendations and the state guidance, the previous assembly meeting that was regularly scheduled for that normal cycle was canceled. And so they had delayed their assembly meeting, I believe, until April 23rd was the next scheduled meeting that they're going to be having. But there were several issues that required immediate attention. And so, in addition to having that special meeting outside the cycle so they could take care of those issues, it was also the first time that we had done an assembly meeting using an online platform, the same one we're using, Zoom. And the assembly members were able to meet virtually and conduct their business by voice voting and those types of things. But we were also able to test our first iteration of taking public comments over the online platform and having people be able to dial in and speak to the assembly. So there was no physical meeting that took place. So I'm fairly sure that that is the first time we've ever done anything like that here at the Boroughs. So it's an example of things that we're all adjusting to as the situation unfolds and as it changes. So there were a few things, mainly talking about an appropriation of funds for me to continue my response here in the Office of Emergency Management. There were also a couple of other items of business as it relates to some emergency amendments to South Peninsula Hospital agreement during COVID-19 and supporting an application for them to get some assistance. And I'm drawing a blank on the one other thing, but there were 4 emergency items that they had to take action on that required the Assembly's assent. So that's why they had that meeting out of cycle. So again, you can watch the recording. I think it went fairly well for our first time trying to do things in the online space.
It did. I think it was definitely a win, even for our assembly members who had never done this before, willing to try, and they did a great job doing it from their homes or online from wherever they may have been. You're absolutely right. They were not in the assembly chambers. So kudos to them for, again, knowing and striving to be the public servants for our residents. Appreciate that. With regards to the assembly meeting, some of the questions that came up, or excuse me, some of your comments to the assembly members included actually when the team was formally stood up, but versus, which that was in March, that was March 15th, I believe. But even before that, the actions that had taken place to get us ready. I can't believe that the small group of us, that initial incident management team had started. I know my information strategy was signed off by you on March 2nd. It's been over a month. And even before that, we were doing things. So if you could do even a recap of those events for our audience, similar to what you shared with the assembly, that'd be appreciated.
Of course. So let's talk about that. And it talks a little bit about the kind of what we do in the background, as we always do, to try and prepare for things that we see coming. And normally, I don't want to say we're not doing it. It is starting to come up into our mind. But normally, for instance, right now, we would start preparing for wildfire season. Snow is beginning to melt out there, even though some has been falling the past few days. But it's April, and it is that time. So we started monitoring this, in much the same way that many others did, and watching the news and seeing news reports. But as things progressed throughout the new year, we started getting a little bit more attention to guidance we were receiving and following some of that professional advice. And so I believe, and I don't have that date right in front of me, but I believe in late February, we started meeting. We did some training on what we knew about COVID-19 at the time for our incident management team members, just to give them a recap. It's important, especially in something like this. We've been seeing that sometimes there's quite a bit of misinformation out there. So we start with training, and we start with getting factual information out to our folks so we're all on the same page. So we did a few sessions there, and we started doing some contingency planning. And one of those things was to kind of put the dust off the plan, but look at a plan that we have called COOP. That's an acronym that stands for Continuity of Operations Plan. And put simply, a COOP plan is not like a response plan, like our emergency operations plan, but it's one that outlines how we are going to do business as a borough and all of our essential services during an emergency where we may not be able to be at our normal workplace, or we may not have our normal staffing. So we rolled this out as an update. An update was needed for it. It was kind of on that proverbial list that I know we all have of things we need to do at home or at work. and we started getting with our department heads and making sure and updating the information on that plan, making sure it was all valid. As we were going down that process, and some of that had been done, some of the mandates and the guidance started coming about social distancing and those things. So we were through that when we actually had to implement that plan with some of the closures and restrictions to borough facilities and making sure that folks were still available and that those services were still provisioned. So examples of that plan is how we remote work, and how folks are able to work even without being physically at the facility. So that planning all took place. We went through that process, and at the same time, I think on March 16th, we fully activated our response. That was our first day with our incident management team. And speaking of COOP plans, it's kind of an interesting thing that when we write these plans, I know, and I was heavily involved in the process when we did our first iteration of COOP planning, and we never thought, it's interesting, you turn to my section and it doesn't really say anything about a pandemic. It kind of assumes that we're going to be at our facility, which is built to be resilient and be able to last through natural disasters and things. And all of a sudden, I am here in my office today, but we've pretty much all of us have been remote working. So not only do we have an incident management team and we go into kind of a new tempo or new work, we're used to being face to face and pretty much in the same room. And so it's just another example of trying to adapt as we're doing all this and dealing with a new thing while also not being able to be face to face. So platforms like this and other technology tools we've implemented have been a great thing. So we started that on March 16th, and then our first confirmed case of COVID-19 was on March 18th. And we started issuing some disaster declarations, as did the cities. And that brings us up to that point. We have been activated each day since at various staffing levels, but generally we're fully active during the week and on the weekends, with the exception of the first weekend. So I guess this is now the third weekend. We try to give people some days off, some well-deserved rest.
And that's good to note, because we're, like you've said to us several times, we are in the marathon, and that means we've got to pace ourselves. We have to take care of ourselves and our families. And so being able to get some of that respite is very important so we can sustain our functions going forward. Right. Let's talk a little bit about what you mean with scaled down crew for this weekend. What does that look like for you?
So we have major functional areas that we talk about, and I mentioned them, but essentially we have command, and then operations, planning, logistics, and finance. And so those sections are all staffed, but they're staffed with a minimal amount of people. So we're always staffed because our city emergency operations centers are staffed, and we're an important link and a coordination point for them. So as long as our cities and our hospitals have emergency personnel, we are also available to take their requests and to coordinate. So what that really looks like is one or two people from each of those sections will be on duty over the weekend to make sure that if there are any changes, we can quickly recall everybody or respond to anybody's needs. But again, we're in a marathon, and we know that the federal guidance at this point for social distancing is telling us that needs to continue through the end of this month. So we expect to be activated at that level at least through the end of this month, if not further. So weekends are important, so we rotate that time, and again, just try and give everybody some time off. And that's a good point for everybody, is if you've been remote working or you've been doing things, I hope you have some time off this weekend to get outside and recreate, keeping that social distance, and doing those types of things.
Very good. There's been a few questions that have popped up on the screen, and most certainly we'll get to those. Any additional comments that you'd want to share with us with regards to the assembly meeting before we move on to those comments?
And just we talked a little bit about the things that we do. So we are that coordination point, as I just mentioned, but some of the major tasks that the incident management team is tasked with right now, we're focusing on assisting our hospitals with their alternate care sites and their alternate care plans, and being able to increase capacity if that's needed for this response. We're tasked with, again, being that coordination point, taking requests from cities, doing a lot of forward planning, a lot of trying to plan and use models and use data to look at other things that may be coming down the pike. And that is kind of the most nebulous task that we're dealing with, but we're able to do some forward planning and just again trying to be ready for things. We make sure we host a morning working group with all of our cooperators and those types of things, and make sure that everybody's in the loop and everybody's got that open line of communication. Finally, one of the biggest things that we do is information. One of our firm tenets here at the borough, especially when we're into incident management, is making sure that everybody has the information they need. You have factual information that's verified, and we present it to you in a variety of ways that are accessible to you. So this is where Brenda, our lead public information officer, comes into play. That's her role. And we are doing things like these videos, like our posts on Facebook and Twitter, like our website, kpboem.com, that we've talked about. That's where you're going to have factual and updated information. And we actually spend a lot of resources vetting that information, making sure it goes out. And that's Brenda's team. Brenda, I don't know if you'd like to talk a little bit more about that process, but definitely one that's very important to us.
I do. I want to do a huge shout out to my team of individuals, PIOs, we call it our shop, that are the reason why we are so successful in getting the information out. It's more than a one-man show, one-person show. That includes folks that have solid information skills, whether it's social media or content, writing content, gathering that information so that we can create storyboards and then get those campaign messaging out for you, reaching out to across the borough, different agencies, cities, our municipalities and our tribal entities, our nonprofits, and much more, asking them what are they looking at and how can we help them to make sure their official message is put onto the blog. And I just want to do another call to action for everyone that is watching. Those that do not have internet here on the peninsula, there's about 20% that don't have reliable internet on the peninsula. Reach out, call folks you know that maybe don't even want to deal with internet. Let them know what's going on so that they know that they're getting the facts from you, that you are getting it from the trusted source that we provide to you on the borough as well as on Facebook. So thank you for that, Dan. Like I said, I could not speak more highly about the team of folks in our PIO shop, because even right now, while I am working with you, we've got PIOs on the background that are providing information in the comment threads, that are letting me know, hey, here's a question that folks are wanting to get answered. So it truly is a team effort. Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's something that I think has a lot of kudos to you and to the folks that you've worked with. And I know over the years we've had volunteers help, we've had call centers up, different types of technology. So, we are internet centric, but I know that a lot of our other sources, like our local media partners, do grab some of this information, put it out there as well. And of course, we're thankful for that. So that's really a brief recap on what I talked about with the assembly today. And really, as we're looking towards the future, we'll just end this subject by saying we're trying to look at those contingencies. We're trying to look forward as best we can. This is an event that, I'm just going to be honest, there is no playbook for this. I certainly would love for everybody out there to think that I'm just the expert in everything and I know exactly how this works and we're just going to get this handled. But I can't quite take that credit. So my team and I are doing a great job of doing as best we can to forward think this and do those things. And I think we've got a lot of things done and hopefully a lot of things ready. But we're going to take this one day at a time, just like I know you are out there. And we'll, like I say, we'll work through it together. All of the cities have their emergency teams in place. They're all working just as hard to help provide, anything that we can for our residents and our nonprofits. And it's a trying time. So we'll be here with you. We're talking with you and we'll keep providing that information and letting you know how you can help when those opportunities arise.
And with that, shall we go to questions? We've got a few tonight.
Let's do it.
If you're willing to answer some of them I don't know that we can, as I always try to couch by saying, if we can't answer the questions, we'll certainly try to get you the information, or if it belongs to an agency, we encourage them to reach out and to provide information as well. And with that, some of the questions include, how has the borough extended the date for when studded tires need to be changed over? Which that's not ours, but can you explain what that means for us here on the peninsula?
Sure, yep, you're right. That is not something the borough would do. The state mandates when those studded tires need to be changed over. And they have made a change to that. And I saw it today in the middle of some other things, and I'm going to actually ask Brenda if she has it pulled up to what that date is. I believe there was an extension and a request to use some discretion. So the state has helped us with that. Brenda, do you have that pulled up there?
I do. I'm just going to pull it up on the blog, by the way, to let folks know when that happens. And it says here that the studded tire deadline is temporarily suspended until May 11th. And to read the full detail of this release, you could go to our blog, kpboem.com.
Very good. Yep. And again, well, I'm sure that's a thing to help us maintain our social distancing. We know how the lineup at the tire shop is when it comes time to do that. So still, encourage that social distancing and getting out there and doing that. But that's an important note. So thanks to the governor for allowing some flexibility for all of us to do that.
I would also like to take a moment to let folks know on the blog is our situation report, and has lots of great information across the borough, things that are affecting the borough from different agencies, decisions that have been made that maybe you'd want to key in on how that may affect your life. And with that, that brings me to another question that was asked that I think we can help with, and that is, when you are traveling, what does a passenger need if they're going to fly on one of our commercial airlines here on the peninsula? Is there anything specific they need to be taking with them?
No, and I don't think there's anything specific that they need to be taking. I believe some of our private carriers have began doing some screening about asking questions and seeing if you might have symptoms for COVID-19. But I would double check with your carrier before you head off to the airport and make sure that there isn't anything that you need or to bring or to do before you take your flight. Of course, those flights hopefully for essential business or critical personal errands only. So check with them, and also, of course, check their schedules to be sure. If you booked your flight a month ago, for instance, I know many of those schedules have changed. So call ahead or visit their website to check on that.
Another travel question, is it essential if you are coming home from the lower 48, like flying into Kenai or Homer, that you still need to do the quarantine or self-isolation? Can you do that? Can you come home? I see that as another part of the question.
Can you come home? Of course. So the air travel is still open. So if most of us that are flying into Anchorage, and then we might catch a plane down to Kenai or Homer or drive down. Yep, coming home is certainly in the intent, I think, of the governor's mandate as I read it. But that 14-day quarantine period is still something that needs to be adhered to. So remember what the governor's mandate said: as you come in to the airport, you are to immediately go to your quarantine location. If you're coming home, that's going to be your home or a hotel or whatever that is. And unless you're getting urgent medical care, you are mandated to stay there for that 14 days. Remember that most of us fly through Seattle or Portland or Los Angeles to get home, and there certainly has been community spread in those communities. So for our safety, when you do come home and you do travel home, make sure you're going directly there and staying there for that 14-day period, and making arrangements for your groceries and other things that you might need.
Another question with regards to assistance, is the Red Cross available if needed?
Yep, and I believe I've gotten some messages from them, and I have not been had a chance to have a dialogue in person one-on-one, but the Red Cross is always available to assist homeowners, and when there are emergencies or when there's larger scale emergencies, such as where we might need to have some temporary sheltering or something similar, some individual assistance. I believe the Red Cross has got some protocols in place for safety and maybe modified things a bit, but They do have an office here in Kenai and are available. So we'll be call on them if needed for the emergency. And if you do deal with them and say you experience a fire or something else, the fire department, the local agency can help get you in touch with them if needed.
Thank you. A question that is not response related, but it has come up several times, and I don't know that you can answer it, but I'm going to go ahead and share it with you. Is will the borough be extending the date for quarterly taxes that are due?
And I can't answer that at this time. I haven't been in those conversations. I think actually that reminded me of one of the other items on our assembly agenda was some of the billing for what we call I always call it by an acronym, but it's the Utility Special Assessment Districts. And those, because those are coming due with, of course, some of the closures and things, they extended the deadline. That's usually, I believe, March to June. So as far as quarterly taxes, I'm assuming you're talking about sales tax. There haven't been any changes made at this time, but I encourage you, if you do have any questions on that or concerns, please give the borough a call, give those folks in the sales tax office a ring and just discuss that with them. And I'm sure that that's something that will be looked at as we look comprehensively at some other things, but I don't believe any decisions have been made at this time. So call the folks in the finance department, the friendly folks, they'll help you out. And really, if you need anything else for the borough as well, I'll just give out our phone numbers here while we're at it, 262-4441. Or if you're outside of Kenai Soldotna, 800-478-4441. And just let the folks there that pick up know what you need, and they'll get you to the right person. And also our website, kpb.us, is a great resource.
Dan, that's about all the questions we have time for tonight, with just a couple minutes to close. I do want to just take a moment to thank everyone in the borough, our borough staff. It's not just our team, but across all of the departments. They are doing something in one way or another to help this response and to help our residents to maintain that level of service that they expect. And I just want to give them a big shout out and a big hug as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to you for some closing comments.
Of course. So before I get into too many closing comments here, I kind of wanted to talk about information and talk about our response. So we talked about a little bit about ramping down and giving some folks the day off for the weekend and doing some of that. So I think we're going to hopefully, if you don't mind, extend that to these broadcasts. So we're kind of in a mode here of that marathon that Brenda talked about earlier. So we're going to change the schedule of these broadcasts. So instead of seeing you tomorrow night at 7, we're going to right now change that schedule to Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Unless there's something that warrants a discussion or the situation changes. But I want to assure you that our Facebook and our Twitter feed will have up-to-date information. We'll make sure that you're informed, even if we're not doing these with any developments. Of course, you can always check our website, kpboem.com, for those sources of official information. So if you'll allow us to ramp down a little bit, we want to be respectful of your time. Make sure that we're not taking up a lot of time in your evening that isn't providing you important information that you need to know to stay safe or to be kept abreast of what's going on with the borough or city responses. So just wanted to announce that schedule. Was there anything to add, Brenda, on that? I think that's our plan, right?
It is our plan, and most certainly we will keep this time slot so that in the event we need to resume our nightly schedule, we will most certainly do so. But we also want to respect your time, and the fact that you trust us with your 30 minutes every night has been greatly appreciated, and we certainly value and respect you as well. And I'll just say goodnight, and I'll throw it back to you, Dan.
And I do want to thank the public. It's been really a great thing, especially at the end of a long day, to see some of the words of well wishing and thanks for what we're doing. And we want to thank you too for everybody's lives have been disrupted. Everybody's had events that's been canceled or postponed, or just something that we certainly didn't expect. So thank you so much for folks with your understanding and following the governor's mandates and the advice that has been put out. So definitely appreciate that. And, let's continue to stay inside. Let's continue to flatten the curve, and let's continue to stay safe and to stay healthy. So with that being said, once again, as we said, remember no live stream until 7 o'clock Tuesday night. We'll be taking the weekend off, but can always keep up with information. KPB Alerts on Facebook, at KPB Alerts on Twitter, on the web, www.kpboem.com. On behalf of Borough Mayor Charlie Pierce, everybody on my incident management team, Brenda and myself, I'm Dan Nelson. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a very wonderful weekend. We'll see you live back here on Tuesday. Check our social media and websites in the interim. Thanks so much.